Eric Spoelstra may have clued us in on his starting lineup earlier this week, but one key role has yet to be defined. Who are the top candidates to fill it, and what do they bring to the table? We break down the options on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members, and the best way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app and hit that subscribe button on YouTube. A reminder that you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're talking about some starting lineup options for the Heat today. So as we know, Eric Spoelstra has basically named 4 of his starters: Tyler Herro, Rozier, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. That much we know. There's still a question about who that 5th starter is going to be. I think, David, there's an offensive-leaning choice. I think there's a clear defensive-leaning choice. And then there's the incumbent. And we'll start there with Nikola Jovic, who finished last year as a starting power forward, started 5 playoff games, the final 25 games at power forward to end the regular season. And when you kind of look at him, he's also sort of the positional fit, right? He's, you could argue, maybe the only guy with true power forward size on the roster besides Bam Adebayo, who's obviously starting at center. 6'10". I don't know if you saw this. The Heat are listing him now at 240 pounds. Which I don't know that that's BS. Like, my BS meter isn't necessarily going off on that. Like we talked about yesterday, we were sitting next to him, and I'm like, yep, that guy could definitely weigh 240 pounds. He's getting bigger. So, yeah, I think he's sort of the positional fit if you're looking at kind of your prototypical size power forward.
I don't think there's any denying that. I think he's got the size. He's got the ability. He's talked about making this a goal for this season, wanting to be more effective around the rim, being able to rebound better, create plays for himself and others. Like, he is, I think, the best choice. And maybe that's no surprise to anybody who's heard us talking about Nico over the last couple of days. But I just think, in terms of what he brings to the table, I think his potential, the growth we've seen from him over the last 2 seasons, specifically last year, because obviously as a rookie, he didn't get much of an opportunity. He was hurt, etc. Didn't really play much. I think it's completely different now. And I think, given what he's capable of and what we've seen from him, I think he's a better choice. I really do. Like, I don't know exactly what those minutes and the minute allotment looks like, but I think he's the best complement. I think he's the best fit. I think he's going to have, he gives the starting lineup, in my opinion, the highest ceiling. And that might just be for 10-minute spurts here and there, but I still think it's more, he's most effective and when he'll be able to contribute at a higher level. So, I'm a little surprised to think that he, at least in your view, the best offensive fit for this team.
I don't know that he's not the best offensive fit. I just think I think about, like, if I
I
was
know who the best defensive option is. That's
Sure.
that's pretty clear.
Yeah, I don't know that I didn't mean it like he's like the next guy that we're going to talk about is a better offensive fit. I just thought if you were going to go with the next option, it would be because of offense.
Okay.
We can kind of debate that when we get there, but in terms of Nikola Jovic, I think, like, when we talk about the prototype, he's sort of the closest thing the Heat have had to the Kelly Olynyk, Myers Leonard type that we saw the Heat have a lot of success with in their bubble run. Obviously, they went to the NBA Finals with that. You look at just what he could do from a three-point shooting perspective. He shot 40% on threes last year, 47% from the corners. That is elite. That guy is an elite floor spacer, spot-up shooter. Defenses started closing out on him more. They started labeling him a shooter as the scouting report sort of caught up with Nico towards the end of last season. He does create space on the court. And not to mention, like, the passing and the playmaking and pushing the pace and all those things that he does are kind of little bonuses. But in terms of, like, okay, we've seen this already with Kelly Olynyk and Myers Leonard plus Bam Adebayo. We see how this works. And Nikola Jovic has that. Similar to Olynyk, they both so far have struggled to be high-level rebounders. They're not as physical as you'd want. Given their size, you'd think they would be grabbing, 6, 7, 8 rebounds a game, and they're just far from that and have been for most of their careers. Olynyk obviously been in the league much longer. But Nico, unlike Kelly Olynyk, does have that growth that you were talking about, that higher ceiling, that ability to maybe be a little bit more physical. And that was my big takeaway talking with Nikola Jovic at Media Day was, yeah, this guy is not going to be a point guard. This guy's not a wing. This guy is not some kind of just oversized perimeter player. The Heat are developing him as a big man. They are making him a power forward. They are saying, be more physical. We need you to do power forward things because all that extra stuff is awesome. And that's what gives you such a high ceiling. But it's sort of weird, right? With Nico, it's always like that ceiling stuff is always there, but that base level, the stuff that raises your floor as a basketball player, hasn't really been there. Like he's already kind of checked the ceiling boxes, but he hasn't had that strong foundation of the positional things that is required of a power forward. He hasn't done those things those first 2 years. If he can do that, I think he becomes the clear starting power forward.
Yeah, I see your point there. I just, it means so much less now, and we're talking about how positional versatility has changed over the last few years, and I think it's the consensus now is that you want multiple skilled players that can do many different things and can guard and switch defensively, and I think that's asking for a lot. And I don't think any team really has it down to a perfect science. I guess you can make a case that the Celtics come as close in terms of what they can bring to the table. But other than that, I think it's still very much a work in progress for 29 other teams. But given what Nico is capable of and what we've seen from him, there are point guard skills. There's a power forward center's body, and there's everything in between, including some passing chops, some ability to space the floor, as you pointed out, and what we expect and what he told us would be more of a, paint, more effective scoring in the paint. That sounds like a pretty versatile player to me. And I think that's the kind of guy that you'd want to be able to. Now, there are concerns about what he brings defensively and whether he can adjust there. Because, again, if you're looking at, multiple teams that are going to be able to support lineups with versatile players, how does he make those switches? How does he continue to adjust and not pick up ticky-tack fouls that will be able to leave him out on the floor for prolonged periods of time? That, I think, is still very much an evolution. It's not to say that he can't play well defensively. I'd say he's below average at this point defensively, but getting better. I'm wondering whether or not he takes a leap to at least average level defensively, includes maybe a couple of shots blocked here and there, maybe force a couple of turnovers. He's still a little slow, I think, in terms of his defensive adjustments and the way he moves his feet. He can get caught on an island somewhat. I don't think it's lack of understanding, and he doesn't get lost necessarily in that regard. But speedier point guard will be able to drive past him pretty easily, and so I think that's still a concern. And without a legitimate shot blocker in the lineup, at least none that we expect, I don't think that it could still be very much a problem that other teams could find a way to exploit.
He's not a shot blocker, right? To your point, I mean, he had 14 blocks all of last year. That's how many Josh Richardson had. Kyle Lowry had more in fewer games. Whoa. Right. Yeah, exactly. So he's not a shot blocker, and he needs to be. And we've seen flashes of it. You're absolutely right. Defensively, that's where the growth has to come for Nico. The offensive stuff, that's going to be there. He, at the very least, can stand in the corner and make threes. Like the floor on offense is it's there, and it's high. It makes sense for what this team needs. Defensively, if you're already starting kind of behind the 8 ball with Tyler Herro and perhaps Terry Rozier in that backcourt as minus defenders, or at least guys lacking size and can be exploited defensively, you need basically the other 3 guys to be plus defenders. And Nico is just not that. He hasn't been in his first 2 years. To your point, huge improvements last year. He went from unplayable defensively to at least able to get on the floor. And that's a dramatic improvement to the point where he was the starting power forward. And Eric Spoelstra's talked about that. It wasn't given to him. He earned it, right? They could have went other options. They could have stayed with Caleb Martin at the 4 like they had the previous year. They could have went with Haywood Highsmith, perhaps, if they wanted to, at that spot. They could have went back to Kevin Love and Bam as a pairing if they really wanted to. Like, Nico got it. So, but he needs to get way better. He needs to get way better, particularly not only if he wants to start games, but even close games, too, because he was barely closing games last year, too. The size is there. We saw flashes of him kind of coming over as a help side defender and things like that. He needs to get, to your point, faster in recognizing those things and really be a playmaker on that end. Because a lot of times defensively, it just felt like he was out there and not really doing anything, not making an impact defensively the way that Bam, Jimmy, and Haywood can. And maybe that's too much to ask of him, but there's got to be something in between what he was doing and what he should be doing this coming season. So The size is there to at least be a help side, rim protector, deterrent kind of guy. But to your point, when he gets on an island, he just needs to be better. And we saw flashes. Like he had this like one game against Atlanta where he locked up DeJounte Murray on the perimeter. That made the rounds on social media. It's like that was the exception, not the rule. But if he could do that more consistently, then you really got something there. So I think you and I agree. He's got the inside track. He's been starting. He's been part of that starting lineup. He's been playing with Terry, Tyler, Jimmy, and Bam in training camp in the Bahamas this week. So he's been getting those reps in as part of that lineup. But he is not, at least as of media day and as of today, locked down that starting spot. We got two more options to talk about, maybe even a better offensive option like we were talking about earlier. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat before we get to the defensive option later on in the show. It's all coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time's got a new feature called Game Time Picks, and guess what? It makes buying tickets for your favorite events easier than ever before. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can just find exactly what you're looking for, and you know exactly what you're going to pay for, because thanks to Game Time, they've got their all-in pricing feature. It shows the total right up front, so you don't have to worry about any surprise fees at checkout. No worrying about, oh, whether or not there's going to be a tax or a surcharge. No, none of that. You know what you're going to pay for as soon as you pick the seats you're looking for, and you'll see exactly where you're going to be sitting from using their seat views feature. It gives you a panoramic view on the app that you might download before you buy the tickets, so you know exactly where you're going to be sitting. So many great things to love about Game Time, and it just takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets, and that's why Game Time is the choice for you. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms to apply, but create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. I want to invite you to join the exclusive Locked On Heat Insider community. If you want to join, there's a link in the show notes on YouTube and in the podcast description. If you join, you're getting a bunch of cool stuff, exclusive content, insider info from us and our reporting on the ground, game notes, stats while we cover the games live, intel on moves and trades that could happen before the trade deadline, and best of all, a chance to talk with us one-on-one through the subtext messaging platform. This is the best way to be a Locked On Heat lifer. If you want to join, you can sign up with the link in the show notes. It's free for 14 days. After that, it goes to $4.99 a month. You can cancel it at any time. No worries. Really excited with this chance to connect with you all. Already getting some subscriptions this week.
Nice.
Now that we've launched it. So go ahead and check that out again for free for 14 days. Just to check it out. All right. The other option here is Jaime Jaquez Jr., and he's the guy that we were talking about, the offensive option. Maybe not necessarily the best offensive option, and I think but certainly an offensive option. You can make the argument either way. He's more dynamic with the ball in his hands than Nikola Jovic is. He could do more, right? He's got the post up. He's got the 3-level scoring. Like Jovic at this stage is not a 3-level scorer. Jaime is. Sort of. I guess the biggest question with Jaime is the 3-point shooting.
Yeah.
32% from 3 last year. Not terrible, but needs to get better, and was very streaky. So I had it breaking down by months here. 39% on threes from November, 32% in December, 26% in January, 20% in February, 30% in March, and then back up to 41% in April. Like, yeah, 32% is not great. It's below league average, and I don't think you can use the term reliable with Jaime. You just don't know if he's going to be able to if he's making shots tonight or not. And so the coaching staff, the front office, in Jaime's interview made it very clear, his exit interview from after his rookie year, hey, you need to get better at 3-point shooting. And everything Jaime has talked about all summer long in every interview is, I'm working on the 3-point shooting, I'm working on the 3-point shooting, and I'm working on the 3-point shooting. We'll see. I think in order for him to actually, I don't know, the best case for him getting this 5th starting job will be if he dramatically improves as a 3-point shooter and the Heat can trust him to make open shots. Because when you're playing with Jimmy and you're playing with Bam, then you're a role player, and your primary role is to space the floor for those guys. So if he can't do that, it just makes playing him with those two guys that much more difficult.
I like the idea of Jaime starting at power forward. Like there is a lot to like. I mean, we talked about it yesterday, and we're continuing to see more coverage of of Heat training camp saying, we're looking to juice up the offense, and it was a really insightful piece from Anthony Chang, kind of talking about some of the things that they've done to kind of make that more exciting. So definitely check that out if you have a subscription to the Miami Herald. But obviously, offense is a priority for this team, as it should be. I just look at what Jaime can do, his ability to attack the basket, put pressure in the rim. We made that a priority yesterday in our discussion about how important it is, as well as spacing the floor. You have to be able to do that consistently. But you've got Terry out there, you've got Tyler out there, and we assume Bam and Jimmy are going to be putting up a consistent number of three-point attempts. A fifth player that can attack the rim and potentially space the floor. Like I'm wondering what the threshold is even now as we're talking about. Like what would be the minimum three-point shooting to make him a better value over Nico replacement? You know what I'm saying? Because given the fact that Nico can shoot 40% from three or roundabouts there, like if you get Jaime at 34%, is that enough to justify him starting over Nico? I'd have a tough time with that. 35%, that's a better case, etc. So like he has to be able to knock those down with some consistent, given the fact that he does other things better than Nico, being able to attack the rim, etc. I'm sure the rebounding numbers probably favor Jaime too, even as we're talking about this. So like he has a knack for being able to pull the ball down when he puts up these shots there. He's a lob threat as well. So there are things about his game that he does better than Nico. Now, also though, defensively, like I don't know that he's much better than Nico is, and you could probably make a case that he might be a smidgen worse based on his lack of overall size. Where would you rank these two defensively in terms of like who's better than the other?
It's negligible. Like it almost
Right?
doesn't matter, right? It's
Right.
yeah. So the offensive thing though, like he is the only thing he doesn't do better offensively than Nikola Jovic is shoot threes.
Shoot threes.
And so it's if we're talking about okay, we want quick decision making, that's Jaime. Somebody who can make plays for others, that's Jaime. Get to the rim, right? We talked about this yesterday. It's not just 3-point shooting. Obviously, that's important, but it's getting to the basket, right? It's in training camp this week. Eric Spoelstra has said 3-pointers are worth 3 points. Shots in the restricted area are worth 3 points. Mid-range jumpers are worth 1 point. There is a clear focus on what this offense is trying to do, and it's not just the 3-point shooting. It's getting to the basket. Jaime gets to the basket. He's got that inside game. We talk about posting up and post moves. Nico's talking about maybe incorporating that in game. Jaime, that's a specialty, right? Like that's what he does. So there's no question that I think Jaime Jaquez actually is the better offensive player. The question is whether or not he's the best offensive fit, just because of how important Nico's, or just in general, 3-point shooting is to this offense right now. And Nico obviously just provides that, way more than Jaime Jaquez does. And the other part with starting Jaime is, well, if the ball's not in his hands as much because he's playing with Jimmy, Terry, Tyler, and Bam, who all need the ball in their hands, then, right, like as good as Jaime was as a rookie, he's not better with the ball in his hands than most of those guys,
right?
And so like you want the ball in Jimmy's hands, Terry's hands, Bam's hands. So then he just sort of becomes more of a spot-up shooter. He actually talked about this on Media Day. I have the quote here. Okay, here it is. It goes, quote, "As far as last year, there was a lot of times where I had the ball in my hands and had to make plays. With a lot of guys being back and healthy, things change. I'm going to have to be ready to be able to spot up on the three-point line and knock down shots." That's it. And if he can't, then I don't think he has any chance at becoming the starter.
I'd agree there. I think it's pretty clear that, you mentioned this with Nico earlier in terms of earning more minutes and potentially even being a closer. I think Jaime is the better closer.
I would agree with
but
you.
I still think I think Nico is a better starter. He's just a better complement. I don't know. Maybe that's a tough argument there, but it's just like he's not giving up that much defensively. The size is an issue, but even that, it's just about being able to make quick decisions, attack the basket,
That's right,
and do so effectively in the waning moments of a game, especially if you need to juice the offense a little bit. And in that case, he's better, significantly better, I'd say, than Nico.
Yeah, I think with a starting lineup, just to piggyback on that point, like a starting lineup is more about matching up positionally. That's what your starting five needs to do. Your closing lineup, you don't know what the other team is closing with. You have no idea. Your closing lineup is just simply be the 5 guys you trust the most, more often than not. And I don't think there's any question that Eric Spoelstra trusts Jaime Jaquez in big moments more than Nikola Jovic. He's older, he's more experienced, he's a better decision maker with the ball in his hands. Like, that's not shocking. And so I would say exactly what you just said. That's maybe how you split the difference. Nico starts, Jaime closes, and the other four guys are just the same. I could totally see that being the case this season. Did you have one other thing on
Who's the
this?
better fit? No, who's the better fit off the bench then? Like, if you're talking about,
Jaime,
and I know that's,
right?
yeah, I think so too. I
Because
think so
you could
too.
put the ball in his hands more when a couple of those
he's got
starters
spark
aren't in the
plug.
game.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I'm just wondering also in terms of other developmental players like Khalil, specifically Khalil, who is the better complement to playing alongside Khalil? He's in theory going to be the guy who's going to be rolling to the rim. We talked about this. That's going to be a goal for him. I like Jaime being the guy who has the ball in his hands, attacking the rim. Yeah, and he drew doubles. Like, we saw that he was drawing doubles and attacking the rim ferociously. Finishing with a dunk at times, or maybe a nice spin move, etc. But if now all of a sudden he's got this mountainous lob threat right there with him, that adds a dimension of offense we haven't seen in a while. That could be a really exciting combination there. So, I mean, I would even say you could put him at the three, Jaime at the three rather, and then have Khalil at the center position. And if you have Kevin Love out there at the four, now you've got that floor spacing a little bit more. You got a little bit more dynamism there. So it's
you don't even have to go
lots of different options.
You don't have to go with a natural sized power forward either, the way that you do with Bam, because Bam's just undersized at his position. If you've got Khalil out there, he's going to be big. You can actually afford to be a little bit smaller across the other positions if you want to. You could play Jaime as the four with Khalil, technically, and just kind of have a bunch of guys floating around. But those are the offensive options. What if the Heat just decided, you know what, we're going to double down on defense. We're going to go with our defensive option. We'll talk about who that is and why that might actually be the cleanest fit for this starting lineup after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return over on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game and you want to check out the latest stats, or you want to see live play-by-play, there's so much more to see. And it's all on the same page where you place your bets. And right now, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first bet for just $5. That's just $5 to get $200 in bonus bets. So go visit FanDuel.com today. If you haven't started already, that's the choice for you. Go visit FanDuel.com. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. So the defensive option, Haywood Highsmith. I think these are the three options. It's Nikola Jovic, it's Jaime Jaquez, and I wouldn't count Haywood Highsmith out, although he's probably a long shot, a dark horse, whatever word you want to use, but definitely an option. And the reason why is clear, right? He's the best defender of this group by leaps and bounds. He's trusted. He has more playoff experience than any of these guys. He's been part of the program longer than any of these guys. It might just be his turn, you could argue. And here's this for a stat. Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Haywood Highsmith. When those three guys were on the court together, the Heat held opponents to 109.1 points per 100 possessions. That would have been the second best defensive rating in the league during the regular season. They lock guys up. And if you're the Heat and you think, okay, well, we've got enough offense between Terry Rozier, Tyler Herro, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo, do we necessarily need a fifth guy who's offensive leaning? Guys like Jaime Jaquez who need the ball in their hands. Nikola Jovic, who probably is going to need some shots and need some touches and stuff like that. And might, is he not ready, at the stage we need him to be defensively? Haywood Highsmith, elite defender, doesn't need the ball in his hands, shot 40% from three-point range last year. He was even a little bit better than that from the corners. I would argue he might not be the best fit in terms of the Heat reaching their ceiling. I think he might be the cleanest fit.
We've seen this, a variation of it, at least with PJ Tucker starting alongside.
Yep.
And that's why it makes so much sense. If he's able to knock down threes at the same rate, and he's proven to be maybe not as stout a defender as PJ when it comes to like guarding bigs in particular. I don't know. I also worry about the rebounding numbers because Highsmith obviously a little undersized, although he does have that incredible arm, wingspan, etc. But it's just like you might be sacrificing something in terms of like, again, what we've heard from training camp and the focus, should be on the offense. Is that sacrificing a lot offensively? What were the numbers in 2022 when they had PJ on the roster? Was it what was their offense rank? Now, obviously, they won the Eastern
Top
Conference in terms of
15. They were
top
top
15.
15 or top half of the league thereabouts.
So
Yeah, it was the last time they
better
were in
than
the
they've
bottom
been.
10.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he shot so well from 3-point range to start the season. Like at one point, he was like hovering over 50%, and then those numbers kind of just return to the mean there a little bit. I don't know if you can continue to rely on that. I as much as I like Haywood, and I think he does add that kind of dimension there defensively, and I would love to see that. You can still bring him off the bench there. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'd have him kind of just be your defensive go-to player. Like we're going to see more playoff opportunities, and moreover, we're talking about this, and it's an important conversation to have. And we also know what this team is and has been over the last couple of years. Somebody's going to get hurt at some point, and you're going to have to find versatile options. And knowing Eric Spoelstra, it's not always substitute an apple with a slightly lesser apple. It's, you know what? I want my lesser apple to stay exactly where he is off the rotation, and I'm going to bring in X, a completely, slightly moldy banana or something. It might be something completely different. Which is why Nico started most of last season, because Highsmith was hurt and Caleb was hurt, et cetera. And there were so many different injuries. It's kind of like, well, you look down and there aren't many other options other than Kevin Love, and that wasn't really effective either. So it's just, I don't know. Highsmith as a starter, the defense is there, the size is not, the switchability, the stoutness with which he guards those bigs. I don't know.
That's the problem. But Jaime is Jaime stronger than Highsmith? I don't know that he is.
No,
and so, I mean, Jovic has the size, but if we're going past Nico and we're kind of looking at these other options, like Haywood Highsmith isn't quite PJ Tucker in terms of being a fire hydrant, but
nice.
He's something between like PJ Tucker and Caleb Martin. And we have seen Eric Spoelstra use both of those guys to a lot of effectiveness. Like PJ Tucker, I would argue, I know that the Heat didn't make the finals the PJ Tucker year. I still think that was the best Heat team, despite them not making the finals. They were a 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, right? The next year, though, they have Caleb Martin starting at the 4. They end up in the NBA Finals, right? That 2023 run. So the blueprint is there where it's like, this really works. And if Haywood Highsmith is something sort of in between Tucker and Caleb Martin, you can make a very clear argument like, yeah, let's just start this guy because we know it works and we've had so much success with this prototype. You already hit, I think, on the main thing, though. Is that three-point shooting for real, or was that a flash in the pan? Was that a blip? Because his 40% from 3 last year, 44% from the corners, unlike anything he's ever done in his entire basketball life before that. Like on the line chart, that thing goes way up off the charts, and you're like, where did this season come from? Now, we know he put a lot of work into his three-point shot. He spends a lot of time shooting with Duncan Robinson, who's one of the best 5 three-point shooters in the NBA. Does he even just become a little bit of a three-point shooter, a better three-point shooter through osmosis? I don't know exactly how this works, but we'll see, right? And I think if he comes out in training camp in the preseason and he's still knocking them down at 40% and you feel good about it, like people didn't guard PJ Tucker from the corner. Like he was wide open all the time. It's a part of the reason why he made him at such a high clip. But he was making him at a high clip. Like those points still go on the board, right? That's still 3 points here and 3 points there. And if Haywood, I don't think anybody's going to guard him the way that you would guard Nikola Jovic or even like a Jaime Jaquez, who just has so much respect around the league. But I don't really care as long as he's making them. Like, hey, heck, more wide open threes. Like we just talked about this. The team needs those. And if he's making them, that could maybe swing things in his direction.
2 factors that might change that perspective, though. One, we're talking about Jimmy Butler in the 24-25, not Jimmy Butler from 3 seasons ago. And I think that should matter. And I think we've talked about this enough about whether or not there's an age and a consideration. He's not going to be able to attack the rim as much as he once did and be able to find PJ Tucker wide open in a corner or Haywood Highsmith in this case. And so I think that's certainly something to consider. I totally blanked out on what the second option. That's the second point I was going to make.
That's totally fair. But the Heat, no matter what, need to figure out ways to generate more looks at the rim, whether that's through Jimmy Butler or maybe it's more through Bam Adebayo, because Bam's never been better. This is not the same Bam from 2 or 3 years ago either. He's better. Terry Rozier's on.
That's the thing. That's what it is. Bam is looking to hit those shots from the corner, and he's certainly an option. And if we're talking about Nico being in the low post and being able to find Bam Adebayo in the corner, or vice versa, you've got multiple options there. I don't know that you can do that with Haywood Highsmith. As if he's already taking up that corner spot where does that leave Bam if he's going to be the starter, who's going to be looking to stretch the floor a little bit and be able to knock down that corner shot as he did in the Olympics, et cetera. So I think that's something definitely to take in mind there, and say, you know what, it's all about this bigger picture and whether or not Haywood is the best complement. And I just don't think he is. You're still leaning Nico in terms of who the better complementary starter is. Yeah, okay, I would agree with that.
And maybe not even on day one. Like I still think that Haywood might again
Long
be
term.
the cleanest choice. But if you're trying to hit a ceiling and be not even like out of the top, like talk about a low bar. Like let's get out of the bottom 10 offensively. That's still not good enough to win a championship. That's still not good enough to make a deep playoff run. Like you got to be top 15 offensively. And if you're the Heat and you think, okay, Nico, Jaime, Haywood, doesn't matter, we still think we can put out a top 10 defense, then you almost have to go with the offensive option because, you know, what you need to do to make up ground offensively is far more than, you know, this team was 5th in defensive rating last year, and that was with Nico starting basically the second half of the year. Like, they could do it. And by the way, the advanced stats are really strong defensively with Nico on the floor. A big reason is that he shared so much of his time on the floor with Jimmy and Bam. Like, that has a lot to do with it. Probably has 98% to do with that number. But I guess the greater point is that the defense didn't crater because of Nico's presence on the court, even if there's obviously room for him to improve on that end. So, yeah, I think you and I agree that Nico has the inside track here. I mean, we know this. He does have the inside track here, and we agree that he's probably ultimately the best fit. But I think this was a good exercise to kind of just go through the three real options here, break down.
And I wouldn't be surprised if anybody else pops out either. Like, I mean, like of these other two options, like if Eric Spoelstra says day one it's going to be Jaime or Haywood, I'd be like, okay, surprising maybe, but not really all that alarming or anything like that. They all have a strong case for and against them. So I think it's good options to have, right? It's you can never have too many good problems like that.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.